All rise.
The Kosovo Specialist Chambers is now in session.
Be seated, please. Mr. Court Officer, please call the case.
Good morning, Your Honors. Good afternoon, Your Honors. This is the file number case CBC 2020-06, the Specialist Prosecutor versus Thaçi, Kadri Veseldi, Recep Salimi, and Jakub Krasniqi. Thank you, Your Honors.
I note for the record that the accused are all present in court today. Today we will start with hearing the evidence of Thaçi witness 1DW-007. Before we start with the evidence of the witness, there are some preliminary matters that the panel would like to address. To begin with, the panel will issue the following oral orders. First oral order, the panel notes that the Thaçi defense request from 13 November 2025 to not reclassify F03410 as public. The panel recalls that in F03452, it instructed the registry to, among other things, reclassify F03410 within 1 week of the testimony of IDW-009, given that F03410 contains identifying information of a withdrawn witness whose identity is confidential. The panel grants the Thaçi defense request. The panel therefore amends its order in paragraph 91 and 92 of F03452 and orders the registry to not reclassify F03410 and instructs the Thaçi defense to file a public redacted version of F03410 by Thursday, 20 November 2025. This concludes the panel's first oral order. The panel further notes that on 17 November 2025, the Thaçi defense submitted an urgent request to amend its exhibit list F03580. The Thaçi defense indicated that the SPO does not object to that request. Can the SPO confirm that?
We do, Your Honor.
All right. Any objection from any of the other defense counsel? None seen. Having heard the parties' submissions, the panel grants the Thaçi defense request F03580 and orders it to submit its amended exhibit list by Friday, 21 November 2025. This concludes the panel's second oral order. With regards to today's schedule, please note that we will take a lunch break at 1:30 p.m. We will then resume at 2:30 p.m. and continue till the end of today's hearing at 4:30 p.m. with a 10-minute break at 3:30. Now we'll proceed with the hearing of the evidence of the Thaçi defense 1DW-007. Please bring the witness in. I'm sorry, do you have something before we begin?
Just two matters. One, Mr. President, may we have leave to add the document that was now allowed to be added to our exhibit list, which is DHT 12601 to DHT 12603 to our queue, please.
Unless there's an objection?
None, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you. And
Granted.
Thank you. And the only other question is, am I going straight to 1:30, or do you tend to take a break?
We'll try to go straight to 1:30, but if the witness needs to break, or if anybody needs to break urgently, please let me know.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm sorry. Court officer, do not bring the witness in yet. I have one other thing I didn't notice. forgot about. First, as a reminder, in filing F03558, the panel authorized the following measures under Rule 107 for the present witness. The witness's testimony is limited to defined topics, and the scope of cross-examination is limited to the scope of direct examination, as well as issues regarding credibility. 2, the witness may decline to answer questions on the ground of confidentiality. Representatives of the Rule 107 provider are authorized to be present during the testimony of 1DW-007. And 4, the witness is not authorized to testify either on direct examination or on cross about any matter for any purpose other than those specified. The panel will not entertain questions that cannot be shown to be clearly linked to matters authorized by Rule 107 by the 107 provider and relevant to the case. Where queried on the point, the questioning party should be ready to state how certain lines of questioning fall within the scope of the Rule 107 authorization. Now, Madam Court Officer, you may bring the witness in. Good morning, General. Please remain standing. Good morning, General Clark. Could you please remain standing for just a moment? Good morning.
Morning.
Could you remain standing for just a moment? The court usher will provide you with the text of the solemn declaration which you are asked to take pursuant to our rules. Please read the document to yourself and then repeat it aloud.
Sure. Conscious of the significance of my testimony and my legal responsibility, I solemnly declare that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and that I shall not withhold anything which has come to my knowledge.
Thank you, General Clark. Please be seated. Regarding introductions, the parties and participants may have noticed that we have a representative of the government of the United States of America joining us this morning. Could you please introduce yourself for the record?
Thank you, Your Honor. Tara Gerhardt-Serna, Deputy Legal Counselor at the U.S. Embassy.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us today. General Clark, today we will start your testimony, which is expected to last approximately 2 days. As you may know, the Thaçi defense will ask you questions first, and then the remaining defense teams. Members of the panel might also have questions for you, and the SPO, of course, can cross-examine you. The Thaçi defense estimate for your direct examination is 3 hours. The remaining defense teams will take approximately 1 hour and 45 minutes. The SBO estimates that it will need 4 hours. As regards each estimate, we hope that the counsel will be judicious in the use of their time. The panel may also allow redirect examination by defense counsel if conditions for it are met. Please, witness, try to answer the questions clearly with short sentences. If you don't understand a question, ask the counsel to repeat it, and if you don't understand, ask them to clarify, and they will attempt to do so. Also, please try to indicate the basis of your knowledge of facts and circumstances that you will be asked about. Please also speak into the microphone and wait 5 seconds before answering a question, and then speak at a slow pace to allow the interpreters to keep up. You are being interpreted in both Albanian and Serbian regularly, so it does take a while, and that's why we ask you to let them catch up. During the next days while you are giving evidence in court, you are not allowed to discuss with anyone the content of your testimony outside of the courtroom. If any person asks you questions outside of this court about your testimony, please let us know immediately. Please stop talking if I ask you to do so, and also stop talking if you see me raise my hand. These indications mean that I need to give you an instruction. If you feel the need to take a break at any point or wish for us to repeat anything, please make an indication and an accommodation will be made. Finally, I note that you are accompanied in the courtroom today by Ms. Gerhardt Serna, a representative of the government of the United States of America. In this regard, the panel has made a prior ruling that your testimony will be limited in scope, and the representative is in court today to help us with that. Please, if you have any doubt about the scope of your testimony, you may seek leave to ask the panel or the representative for advice. So we begin now with the questioning. We begin with the questioning from Mr. Misitich, representing Mr. Thaçi. Please give him your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, General Clark. We have met before, but for the record, my name is Luka Misitich. I am
Look,
specialist.
I have to say, the sound is not coming through clearly. I've got this thing up at full volume. I could hear the judge, but you're not coming through at all.
Okay. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Somewhat better?
Okay. If at any point you are having difficulty, just stop us and we will
Okay.
try to fix the problem.
It's not going to work. With you that far from the microphone, it doesn't come through to my headset.
Let me try this. Is this better?
Go ahead, let's see if I can understand it.
Okay. All right.
It's just slightly below the level of comfort of my hearing.
It's
just
above.
the way it is.
It's too loud or not?
No,
loud?
too low.
Too low. Okay. Okay, I will try like this, and if it becomes difficult for you, we'll stop
Okay.
and we'll try to fix the technical problem. Okay? Could you please state your full name for the record?
Wesley K. Clark,
And what is your date of birth?
23 December 1944,
What is your nationality?
U.S.
Did you give a statement to the Thaçi defense which you signed on October 20th, 2025?
I did.
Mr. Court Officer, could we please put on the screen DHT 12546 to DHT 12556, please? General Clark, do you recognize the document on the screen?
Say that again?
Do you recognize the document on the screen?
Yes.
What is the document?
Statement by me.
Okay. And is this the record of the statement you gave to the Thaçi defense?
Well, it should be, but I can only see the first page of it.
Okay. Let me ask the court officer to turn the page to DHT 12556, please. General Clark, is that your signature?
It is.
Did you have a chance to review this document before you came to court today?
Yes, I did.
And did you have another chance to review this document last week?
Yes, I did.
Did you have an opportunity to meet with me and my colleagues last week via video conference?
Yes, I did.
And in that video conference, were you given an opportunity to make corrections and clarifications to this document?
Yes, I was.
Do you recall those clarifications and corrections being recorded in a note which was read back to you?
Yes, I do recall.
Mr. Court Officer, could we please have on the screen DHT 12595 to DHT 12596, please? And if we could scroll through the document so the general can see it. And if we can go to the next page. Subject to these clarifications and corrections that you gave us last week and that we recorded in this note, is the information you provided in the statement to the Thaçi defense accurate and truthful to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
And subject to these corrections and clarifications recorded in this note, does the information provided in your witness statement to the Thaçi defense accurately reflect what you would say if you were asked the same questions again in court as you were asked when you provided the witness statement?
Yes.
Your Honor, we move for the admission of the witness statement, DHT 12546 to DHT 12556, and any associated exhibits that were provisionally admitted by the trial panel in decision F03558, paragraphs 26 and 42D. And we also tender preparation note 1, DHT 12595 to DHT 12596 for admission.
Any objection by SBO?
We have no objection, Your Honor.
By the other defense counsel, anything? None heard. DHT 12546 to 12556 and DHT 12595 to 12596 are both admitted, together with the associated exhibits as enumerated.
Your Honors, DHT 12546 to DHT 12556, we assigned exhibit number 1D00430, and it's currently classified as confidential. And the preparation note 1, which is DHT 12595 to DHT 12596, will be assigned exhibit number 1D00431, and if we can clarify the classification, please.
I'm looking into it, but I do believe this statement refers to documents that are protected by a Rule 107 provider, so we'll have to file a redacted version of the statement, publicly redacted version.
All right, thank you.
And for the preparation one, it's the same, right? It's going to be confidential.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you wish,
Sorry, let me just add, we'll come back to you. I don't think that that has to be public, but I will confirm it at the next break. I mean, that has to be confidential, but I will confirm it.
you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. On November 14, 2025, the Thaçi defense submitted by email a proposed summary of this witness's now admitted Rule 154 statement to the panel and all parties and participants. We have not received any objection to the proposed summary, so I ask for your leave to read the summary now. Thank you, Mr. President. General Clark is a decorated former four-star general in the United States Army who served as the Supreme Allied Commander, Europe, of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization from 1997 to 2000. General Clark provides evidence about directing NATO's efforts to implement the Holbrooke-Milosevic Agreement from October 1998, enforcing United Nations Security Council Resolution 1199, conducting the air campaign against Yugoslav forces following Milosevic's refusal to sign the Rambouillet Accords, deploying forces in Kosovo in compliance with the Military Technical Agreement and UN Security Council Resolution 1244, and overseeing the demilitarization and transformation of the KLA. General Clark states that no one in the NATO chain of command perceived an armed conflict to have continued after June 1999. He also describes being aware of the wave of violence in the summer of 1999 following the return of Kosovar refugees, and attributes the violence to various factors, including hatred, revenge, blood feuds, and criminal gangs. General Clark did not believe the KLA leadership was engaged in a coordinated effort to target and attack Serbs or minorities, nor did Mr. Thaçi specifically have a motive to engage in such conduct. Finally, General Clark describes various interactions he had with the KLA, the Kosovar Albanian delegation to Rambouillet, and Mr. Thaçi specifically. He states he did not see the KLA as a well-integrated, top-down organization with any functioning command or control structure. He also observed the lack of control that Mr. Thaçi had over the KLA and that he was only a political person without military experience and who had limited influence over the KLA soldiers. Based on General Clark's overall responsibilities and personal observations, he believes it would be unjust to attribute the misconduct of others to Mr. Thaçi. And that concludes the summary, Mr. President.
Thank you.
General Clark, I'm going to pause here for a minute for the interpreters to catch up to us. And I'm going to start by saying that because you and I both speak English, we're going to have a tendency to pick up the pace in our question and answer. And so I'm going to have to remind myself to take a pause between a question and answer. And I would ask if you could help me out with that as well, and sometimes take a pause before answering my question so we can help the interpreters and the court reporter who's transcribing these. So I appreciate your cooperation. I'd like to start with some background questions about who you are. And so, first, as you mentioned in your statement, you graduated from West Point in 1966 as the valedictorian of your class and went on to be a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, correct?
Correct.
You then went on to serve for 34 years in the United States Army, where you became a 4-star general and ultimately the Supreme Allied Commander for Europe. Is that right?
That's correct.
You were also the head of U.S. European Command. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You served as Supreme Allied Commander for Europe from 1997 to 2000, correct?
Correct.
You say in your statement that prior to that, you were the lead military negotiator for the Dayton Peace Accords in 1995 in your role as the Director of Strategic Plans and Policy for the Joint Staff at the Pentagon. Could you tell us what is the job of the Director of Strategic Plans and Policy?
I was responsible for U.S. military policy and strategy worldwide. So during my time, we had problems with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. We had the drug crisis. We had the ongoing war in Bosnia. We had a crisis with Korea, where we almost went to war in Korea, and so forth.
Thank you.
We also had to rewrite the U.S. military strategy. This was the post-Cold War world. There was no U.S. military strategy. Starting in 1994, we rewrote that and also wrote a vision for the United States Armed Forces in the post-2000 period.
Thank you, General. You say in paragraph 5 of your statement that during the negotiations of the Dayton Accords in 1995, you mentioned that you were aware of the George H.W. Bush Christmas warning. Can you tell us what that was and why it was issued?
Well, first of all, I want to say that that when we started the negotiations, I was not aware of this. And the people and the diplomats were quite aware of it. But the general public and those of us in the military who've been elsewhere in December of '92 were not aware of it. But because of violence directed at the Albanian population by the Serb police and special police, the MUP, inside Kosovo, President Bush, George H. Bush, said that directed to Milosevic that he had to stop the violence or the U.S. would respond with its capabilities. It was a veiled reference that we would use military force to stop the repression of the Kosovar Albanian majority in Kosovo.
Now, you also mentioned that you then approached Milosevic at Dayton about his treatment of Kosovar Albanians, and he responded that he would not talk about the issue. Is that correct?
I was with him, yes, when Richard Holbrooke and I approached him, and he said, "We're not going to talk about this. This is my country, my problem."
Okay.
So he just refused to talk about it. I think we tried more than once. We knew it was a point of contention. We knew there was a challenge there, and he just refused to talk about it.
Okay. In paragraph 6 of your statement, you say that you began to focus on Kosovo in the first part of 1998 when you heard reports of a Serb attack on the Yashari family in Kosovo. What were you seeing happening at that time in 1998?
So I flew into Macedonia. It must have been the first couple of days of March. We had a U.S. task force there that had been established a few years earlier to police the border between Serbia and Macedonia. And that was called Task Force Able Sentry. And I had not been down to inspect it. I went down to inspect it. I'd been in command at that point about maybe 7 months. Everything seemed to be going well. I landed. I got an immediate call from the U.S. ambassador in Skopje, Ambassador Chris Hill, who said, "You need to come and see President Gligorov right away." I had read the reports, the spot reports of the murder of the Jashari family. There was concern about it, but when I went to see President Gligorov, he explained to me that this was going to spark open conflict.
And
As he said to me, he said, "These Albanians will fight. They will not roll over. They will not accept this. They will resist this kind of murder."
Mr. Court Officer, could we please have on the screen Exhibit 1D 00430, please?
And let me just say, we had known President Gligorov from the Dayton period. We met with him several times in Skopje. Gligorov was a well-educated man. He was a 1939 graduate of Belgrade University. He spoke English, German, French, Serbian, Russian. He was the old school there. And he was a man who was a very perceptive participant and an observer of the things that were going on in Southeast Europe. So he had a lot of credibility with me when he said that.
Understood. General Clark, I have your statement on the screen, and if we could please turn to paragraph 7 of your statement. General, in this part of your statement, you discuss the fact that after this Yashari family incident, and
Say that again a little bit louder.
I apologize. You discuss in paragraph 7 that after you met with President Gligorov of Macedonia, you began to design an action plan. What was that plan,
Yeah,
and
well-
why did you design a plan?
So after I met with President Gligorov, I sent a note back to the Pentagon, to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense, warning that Milosevic was going to spark another conflict, and suggesting that the Christmas warning from '92 might need to be reiterated. And so at that point, the United States had and NATO had no policy to Kosovo. And during the period March, April 1998, Serb attacks on the population in Kosovo increased to the extent that foreign ministers began to talk to the U.S. Secretary of State about this. And so I thought I knew what could be done, but under NATO procedures, there's no authority to plan anything without political direction. So there were no plans. I did speak to the U.S. Secretary of State about it. I did not speak to any foreign ministers. I was instructed by the United States not to.
And
But when I think what happened was, if I remember correctly, the ministerial meeting in the spring, maybe May of 1998, I was directed to come up with a plan. And that's, I don't remember if it was the defense ministers or foreign ministers, but in any event, that's where I had the direction to come up with a plan. So I had a concept.
And you say in paragraph 7 that that plan included an activation order.
Well, okay, so I had to, when you're in NATO, you have a dual chain of command. So I reported to the military committee and the Secretary General, but I also reported to the Secretary of Defense through the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So I went back to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I explained what I thought could be done, and asked him, got his permission to speak to the White House about it. So I went over and talked to the White House, and then that's where the plan emerged from. I had to get U.S. permission first to do the NATO plan because it was going to use a lot of U.S. assets. So that plan was a multiple stage plan. It started with the idea that we would demonstrate U.S. air power by flying around the circumference of Serbia. And then there was a progression. If the ethnic cleansing continued, we would strike in Kosovo. If that didn't persuade Milosevic to stop the ethnic cleansing, then we would strike inside Serbia itself. And if that didn't work, then there were ground options. Now, the reason I came up with this plan was when I had spoken with Milosevic at Dayton, and I spoke with him many times at Dayton, sometimes in the presence of the delegation, sometimes one-on-one at the direction of Richard Holbrooke. And on one of these meetings, he told me, he said, we Serbs, we had no chance against your NATO Air Force, blah, 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 complaining and whining about this. So I knew that he was very sensitive to NATO air power. So that was the genesis of the plan.
Thank you, General. Did you remain actively engaged throughout 1998 on what was happening in Kosovo?
Of course, yeah. I mean, this was a painful period because I remember at one point a brigadier from the Albanian military came to see me, and he said, look, we're on the high ground looking into Kosovo. We can see these villages like Drenica and so forth. They're firing mortars into the villages. They're killing our people in there. There's ethnic cleansing going on. It was really unbelievable. After we had stopped the war in Bosnia, and here it was, same people, same process.
Thank you, General. Turning your attention to paragraph 9 of your statement, if we could turn the page, Mr. Court Officer. Here, General, you say that in the summer and fall of 1998, the attacks on Kosovar Albanians by the Serb units intensified, resulting in Kosovar Albanians fleeing their homes in the villages and escaping to the mountains. You then discuss in paragraph 10 the conclusion of the Holbrooke-Milosevic agreement. And if we could scroll down a bit so the General can see the paragraph. First, do you recall the purpose or broad terms of the October agreement with Milosevic?
I think the broad terms were he was going to stop the violence and pull the excess military back out of Kosovo. There were 3 or 4 different regiments there. There was a military police brigade. I think there was maybe the an armored regiment, some other forces that were there. He had substantially augmented these forces starting in the spring of 1998, going through the summer. And we had seen this happening. When Holbrooke went back to see Milosevic in June of 98, maybe early July, Holbrooke was at the time waiting confirmation to be UN ambassador for the United States. But the president sent him back in to talk to Milosevic because they were concerned about what was going on the White House was concerned about what was going on in Kosovo. And so Holbrooke called me. He was with Milosevic. Milosevic said, I see your airplanes. We were flying the airplanes around Kosovo. He said, I see your airplanes. He said, but these are my people. I would not hurt them. So that was the first phase of this combined operation that we started. So obviously, he wasn't going to listen to it. And it continued in July and August. And about 400,000 Albanian civilians fled their villages, went into the mountains. Women had babies there. People were afraid. But for the most part, the Serbs were still focused on trying to eliminate the lawyers and doctors in these villages rather than pursuing the people up into the mountains. So they were just stranded there. I was traveling around Europe, and I remember getting instructed by various European statesmen. One of them was President Meri of Estonia. And he explained to me the policies of guerrilla warfare and the way it had been conducted, counter-guerrilla warfare by the Soviet Union. And he said, look, NATO's given this warning. Milosevic is not responding to it. NATO's losing credibility every single day.
Thank you, General. I want to draw your attention to the third item there on the screen. It says part of the agreement called for aerial surveillance and verification by NATO with former Republic of Yugoslavia radar and air defense systems either removed from Kosovo or placed in containment sites and not operated. My question to you is, first of all, territorially, what were you surveilling? What territory were you surveilling?
Oh, this was Kosovo.
Okay. And secondly, whom were you surveilling?
Well, we were watching to see if there was ethnic cleansing going on. So we were watching the Serb military, the MUP, the special police, and ordinary police.
Were you able to surveil any KLA forces?
Well, there wasn't much to see from the air, and there wasn't much you could do about the KLA. Mostly they didn't have radios. There was no chain of command. It wasn't like you were watching two forces.
Okay. In this paragraph, you
But let me just say, this paragraph goes over a lot of ground. So between the end of September and the beginning of November, or beginning of December, I made 3 trips in to Belgrade. I took Javier Solana in once, and we sat down with Milosevic, and Milosevic said, I've withdrawn these forces. And Solana turned to me and said, which forces haven't been withdrawn? I would name the force. He would say it to Milosevic. Milosevic would turn to General Perisic. Of course, they were speaking Serbian at that point, so I couldn't understand it. And then he would say, Milosevic would come back and say, it will be withdrawn, angrily, like we'd caught him at something. Couldn't tell whether he was angry at us for catching him or angry at Perisic for not telling him, but he was angry. So this went 3 rounds with Milosevic. So we left. We thought, successful meeting. Nothing happened. The forces weren't withdrawn. Went back a week later. I told President Milosevic he needed to withdraw the forces. I said, if you don't, NATO's going to tell me to execute this plan and execute bombing. He said, well, NATO must do what it must do. I said, well, now you don't want that, Mr. President. He said, no, you're right. He said, talk to the generals. So I went in and talked to the generals. They laid out the map. They said, oh, these are terrorists here and here, and they were pointing at various areas of Kosovo. I said, these are terrorists. Well, I said, look, you're not going to defeat people who are fighting for their families by calling them terrorists and punishing the whole population. You can't do it. You won't succeed. All you'll do is make more and more enemies. You got to change your tactic. So we had a big argument. That didn't accomplish anything. But I went back and told Milosevic. He said he would do what he could. Nothing changed.
Thank you,
I
General.
made a third trip with General Klaus Naumann, and at that point we sat down and told President Milosevic what we wanted. He said, oh, you're going to have to talk to Mr. Shinovich. He's in charge. So we spent all night working up an agreement. The next morning, it was a Sunday morning, it was time to sign the agreement. President Milosevic showed up about 10 in the morning, and he acted like the agreement wasn't very important. He said, he said, we know how to handle these Albanians, these murderers, they're these killers of their own kind. I said, well, he said, we've done it before. I said, well, Mr. President, how did you handle it? What did you do? He said, we killed them all. And then he presents the agreement that's been typed up by his people, where it's an agreement to follow through on what the United Nations got him to agree to, and pull back forces and do negotiations. And I said, well, Mr. President, I don't see your signature on this agreement. He said it's not necessary. So, oh, yes, it's necessary. So he signed it. And we flew back the next morning. Nothing happened again. So I called the U.S. ambassador on an open line, and I basically said, nothing's moving. If something doesn't start moving by nightfall, I'm going to have to report this to NATO, and we're going to follow through on the plan, which means military airstrikes. Within 2 to 3 hours, stuff started moving. Now, this was all before Ambassador Walker went in with the Kosovo Diplomatic Observer Mission. This was all just trying to get Serbian compliance to what was nominally agreed with Richard Holbrooke.
Thank you, General. I'm going to pause here to let the interpreters catch up.
Okay, I'm speaking too fast.
No, that's fine. We just give them a chance. Thank you. Now, in this paragraph, you say that the North Atlantic Council authorized the activation order for limited airstrikes, which could be executed after 96 hours against Serbia. My question to you is, was this activation order in effect from August 13th, 1998 through the NATO bombing campaign?
Well, this was the activation order that provided the leverage. Holbrooke asked us to execute it because when he went in to see Milosevic the first time, Milosevic was just like he was in the summer. It's like, not too worried about this, whatever. So the idea was to do this activation order, which at the time had never been done.
And apologies, Your Honor, in that question it said August 13, 1998. If that's in reference to the statement, it says October 13,
I apologize.
1998.
It's a slip of it's elapsed, so it should be October. I apologize.
Yeah, it was October.
Yeah.
Because, but what's important about this is that without an activation order, NATO doesn't have any aircraft. This activation order required the nations to identify which aircraft would be provided to NATO in the event of the execution plan.
Thank you, General. In the summer and fall of 1998, were you being briefed through various sources of information about what the situation was on the ground in Kosovo?
Yes,
In addition to being informed about the position of Serbian forces on the ground, were you receiving information about KLA forces on the ground in the summer and fall of 1998?
not much.
Do you recall what information, if any, you had in 1998 about the structure and command of the KLA?
Well, there wasn't much really to talk about in terms of the structure. As far as we knew, these were local groups that had emerged more or less spontaneously in response to years of Serb oppression. And especially after the murder of the Jashari family, I think there was a genuine alarm that more was coming. And so it seemed that there were people that were joining up. That was as much as we could really tell. I actually got more information on the KLA from the Serbs than I did from our own sources. Serbs had circles on the map that would show where the so-called terrorists were. I was looking at it, it's very interesting what they said. They were trying to collect information on it, but of course, most of these people were they were living at home and they were trying to protect their families as far as we could tell.
Thank you, General. If I could turn your attention to paragraphs 17 to 19 in your statement, if we could go. Here you discuss the Rachak incident.
Rachak.
Rachak, yes, the massacre. And your meetings with Milosevic on that subject. You then note that you reduced the notice time to use NATO aircrafts for strikes under the activation order from 96 hours to 48 hours. Why did you decide to reduce the notice time?
See, I'm trying to see what you're reading here.
If you,
Which
if we could scroll
paragraph
down,
is
please.
it?
If we can scroll down.
I
Mr. Clark.
don't, let's see.
Right there in paragraph 19, if you could read it to yourself.
Just trying to put pressure on Milosevic.
Okay. Thank you. If we could turn the page in the statement, please. Paragraph 22, your meeting with Mr. Thaçi. If you could read that paragraph to yourself for a second.
So, paragraph 22?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, well, let me just say first that I had requested to go to the Rambouillet talks because I thought that if I went to Rambouillet, I could persuade the Serbs to go along with the agreement. The basic agreement we written up at Rambouillet was patterned on what we did in Bosnia. It was to put a UN-sponsored NATO force in to stop the killing, stop the murder. There was no intent to drive the Serbs out. That wasn't the plan. The plan was just to, restore harmony and peace. It worked in Bosnia, and so I thought that I could go there, but I wasn't permitted to attend Rambouillet. Finally, I was asked. I was allowed to go to meet the KLA Albanian delegation at I think it was Le Bourget Airfield. So this was toward the end of the first session of the Rambouillet talks. I flew in and I met them. I told them what the NATO plan was, explained that we meant what we said. and shook hands with them, and that was it. And then days later, they accepted the proposal. The Serbs didn't, and that's what was the trigger to start something. And so I met Mr. Thaçi a second time before the campaign began, as I recall. And you know, he was just one of the people there. He was the most presentable. He was the youngest. He was the most, let's say, had a better haircut, better clothes. He was, as I understood it, he was living in Switzerland. He spoke German, not much English. I spoke not much German. We had a hard time communicating, but he wasn't a military commander.
And you say in your statement at paragraph 23 that you reached the conclusion that he was not a military commander because he couldn't help you identify any targets and that he didn't have even a rudimentary understanding of military operations. Is that correct?
That's right. Well, that was when I met with him the third time, I asked for help. We never got any help. I mean, he had no idea what was going on. I showed him a map. I said, where are you right now? What's happening here? The problem I had as a commander was we had no ground force. We really were relying only on air power. We were trying not to strike civilian targets. We were trying to attack enemy forces on the ground in Kosovo. And so I was asking him, where are they? Where are you? Where are they? What should I strike? What targets are there? Nothing.
Thank you, General. In paragraphs 24 and 25 of your statement, you say you do not believe the KLA had any functioning command and control structure. My question to you is, what is the difference between command and control?
Well, we always say command and control because command is authority, but control is being able to observe it, to respond to it, to correct it, to direct it, to follow up on it. And as far as we could tell, there wasn't any. Now, I did have some observers on the border between Albania and Kosovo. And occasionally they would tell me that they were trying to get information. But these were U.S. Special Forces people. But they never got any reliable information either. So it was clear that there were independent groups. They were well motivated, I think. They were fighting. We occasionally would hear they captured somebody. At one point I said, they captured a Russian. I said, I want that Russian brought up here. I want the world to see the Russians are in here. Nothing. We never could, there was just no communications there. There was no grip. These were just people, I guess they were happy to have NATO air power in there. I have no doubt that the Serb military was afraid of them. But in terms of any command and control, a coordinated force, not that I could see.
Thank you, General. Did you ever try to explore the possibility of relying on the KLA as a form of troops on the ground?
No, we tried. That's what I wanted. I wanted forward observers so we could strike and not make mistakes. In one case, we identified a bunch of Serb vehicles around a building that looked like a headquarters building. There was the vehicles were surrounding it. There were antennas. There were communications, and So our intelligence guys identified this as a Serb headquarters, and it was struck. And it turned out it wasn't a Serb headquarters at all. It was a Serbs that had put Kosovars they'd detained in a holding area inside this building, and the vehicles were surrounding it to prevent the Kosovars from leaving. So it was a terrible friendly fire incident that, my airman and I felt awful about when we found out what had happened. But that was an example of the fact that we couldn't get any information off the ground.
Thank you. Mr. Court Officer, could we please have Exhibit 1D00120 on
Got
the
to
screen?
speak more loudly, please. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Okay.
General, I was talking to the court officer. Yep. General Clark, what you see on the screen is a letter from the Department of State dated May 4, 1999, to the Chairman of the Senate Foreign Operations Committee, Senator Mitch McConnell. And I'd just like to ask you a few questions about something the State Department told Senator McConnell in this letter. If I let you take a look at it, it relates to the issue of members of the Senate wanting to arm the KLA. Were you familiar at the time with any initiatives in Congress to arm the KLA?
Actually, I really wasn't watching it.
Okay.
Maybe I knew it at the time, but this was the time at which I was trying to figure out how to ramp up the airstrikes to put more pressure on Milosevic inside Serbia. So this was a carryover of some earlier discussions, I guess.
If we could go to the third paragraph, Mr. Court Officer. There, the Department of State tells Senator McConnell that there is no political structure in Kosovo or effective command and control of the KLA. Is that consistent with your own assessment of the KLA at the time?
Yes.
Okay. Where it says that there is no political structure in Kosovo, did you also believe there was no political structure?
Well, I knew about Mr. Rogova, who was in and out of jail, but we knew that he had a following in Kosovo, but on the other hand, it wasn't a politically effective structure.
When you say that,
And if I could say, it wasn't like it was connected to the armed resistance. If anything, it was separate from the armed resistance, as I recall.
yes. Did you have an assessment of whether there was any civilian control over the KLA?
No, there was no.
Thank you. Would it have been possible for the KLA to have a functioning chain of command from the top to the bottom without NATO and the United States knowing it?
No.
Turning your attention to paragraph, if we could please have the statement back on the screen, 1D00430, please. If we could go to paragraph 27, please. General Clark, in paragraph 27, which is on your screen now, you say that the armed conflict in Kosovo came to an end with the withdrawal of Serb forces pursuant to the technical military agreement in June 1999 and the passage of UN Security Council Resolution 1244. You also say that no one in the chain of command, including the North Atlantic Council, perceived an armed conflict to have continued after June of 1999. First, can you tell us, once KFOR came into Kosovo, how was it structured? Do you recall how many zones there were?
So we had Kosovo we had two NATO forces, one in Albania under General Reith, and it was dealing with the approximately 1 million people who had fled into, close to 1 million people, 500,000 people, let's say, into Albania. So they were at a refugee mission. In Macedonia, we had the 8th Rapid Reaction Corps under General Jackson. So he picked up national delegations. We had Italians, we had French, we had Germans, and so forth that were moved there, ready to move into Kosovo when the resolution was completed. So if I recall correctly, the resolution was signed on Thursday in New York on June 10th, around midday, and the Serbs were supposed to move out on the 11th, and NATO was supposed to come in on the 12th of June. So NATO forces were there and poised and planning to go in. That agreement had followed several days of negotiations between General Jackson representing me and the Serbs along the southern border of Serbia.
Thank you, General. Do you recall how many troops, NATO troops, there were in Kosovo after NATO moved in?
I think we planned for something like 20,000, something like that.
Okay. Did you have air support?
Yes, we had air support.
Did you have overhead surveillance of Kosovo?
We had overhead surveillance.
What would KFOR's response have been if Serbia had attempted to attack Kosovo or the KLA after Serbia had withdrawn its forces?
Well, NATO would have resisted, of course.
If Serbia had attempted to attack Kosovo or the KLA after it had withdrawn its forces, would that have brought Serbia into conflict with NATO?
Yes, it would have.
Was there a real risk, in your view, of resumption of hostilities after Serbian forces withdrew?
I didn't think there was much of a possibility of Serbian forces resuming hostilities, but we still had the unresolved issue of the Russians that were at Pristina Airfield. And we had been surprised by the Russian move from Bosnia on the 11th of June down to seize that airfield in Pristina when the Serbs withdrew. So, you can't disregard responsibilities for force protection and mission accomplishment. So one of those responsibilities was we had to be prepared if something were to happen.
Yes, but I'm trying to get like a gauge how realistic a Serbian offensive on NATO you perceived to be at the time.
Probably wasn't very realistic, but on the other hand, I thought it was appropriate as a commander not to be surprised, not to have never thought about something like this.
Thank you, General. Mr. Court Officer, could we please have on the screen Exhibit P04064, please? General Clark, on your screen is the military technical agreement between KFOR and the governments of Yugoslavia and Serbia. And if we could scroll down to the bottom of this page, please. Actually, if we can go over to the next page, page 2. It defines two terms. Air safety zone is defined as a 25-kilometer zone that extends beyond the Kosovo province border into the rest of FRY territory. It includes the airspace above that 25-kilometer zone. The next definition is the ground safety zone, which is defined as a 5-kilometer zone that extends beyond the Kosovo province border into the rest of FRY territory. It includes the terrain within that 5-kilometer zone. And then if we scroll down to section 4A, it says, to establish a durable cessation of hostilities, under no circumstances shall any forces of the FRY and the Republic of Serbia enter into, re-enter, or remain within the territory of Kosovo or the ground safety zone or the air safety zone described in paragraph 3, Article 1, without the express consent of the International Security Force K4 commander. Local police will be allowed to remain in the ground safety zone. My question to you is, did the Serbs ever challenge the air and safety zones around Kosovo?
Well, not during that period that I recall, no.
Thank
They
you.
were busy dragging their equipment out and trying to recover their military forces.
Thank you. Mr. President, at the request of a provider, I ask if we can move into private session.
Please take us into private session, Mr. Court Officer.
Your Honors, we're in public session. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Court Officer, could we please have on the screen DHT 12601 to DHT 12603, please? And if we could scroll down a bit, please. General Clark, this is a media report that was published in the Irish Times. I believe it's from around the 8th of July. And if we could scroll down, it talks about ethnic violence flaring between Serb and Albanian groups yesterday in the northern town of Mitrovica. On the first day, French KFOR put ethnic tolerance to the test and lifted the barrier dividing the town. It says, shortly after, a crowd of 7,000 ethnic Albanians under heavy KFOR protection had marched peacefully back into the Serb quarters for the first time to highlight their desire to return to their homes. A standoff began between groups of hardline Serbs and Albanians. They positioned themselves at either, if we can scroll down, please, side of the Ibar Bridge, which divides the town ethnically and had been roadblocked by KFOR until yesterday. Rocks were hurled from both sides, but French troops moved in and prevented further serious violence by arresting a Kosovar Albanian man who attempted to throw a hand grenade. My question to you is, do you recall this tension in Mitrovica?
No, I don't recall this incident.
Okay. Do you, are you aware of any confrontation between KLA forces and Serb paramilitaries in Mitrovica in early July 1999?
Well, I'm not aware of any confrontation between Serb paramilitaries and KLA, but I'm aware that there were a series of confrontations during this period. I never thought it was KLA. The KLA had said they weren't going to do this, but I did know that there was a lot of pressure on both sides to try to drive Albanians out of the area north of the Ibar River. And this, I think you've got something dated. This is a November 16th. No, what's the date of this incident?
If we can go back.
Was it September?
No, it's July, but I'll just show you on the date of the, if we can scroll down a little bit. You see the date there, 8 July 1999 is when it was posted to this
Yeah.
listserv. So it
Well,
was before
okay,
that.
so that was immediately upon the entry, a week or so after the, no, I guess it would have been like 5 weeks after we got in there with KFOR. No, there were a lot of moves like this going on as people were trying to assert their dominance, but I don't think it was organized. I never had this sense it was organized by the KLA. This was individual people, and it ended. There was a lot of pushing and shoving and ethnic cleansing north of the Ibar River, to the extent that I had to go see the French defense minister in early October. I went to the NATO Secretary General and complained because basically there was an organized Serb effort to cleanse the area north of the Ibar, where Mitrovica was, of Albanians. And I went to see Minister Richard at the instruction of Secretary General Solana. And he said, Richard told me, no, I've given orders to the French troops to protect the Serbs in that area and support them. So I had some difficulty with that. But it's the way NATO operates is there's a certain amount of national discretion, even under NATO command and control. So I had appealed to him. He didn't change his orders. I later set up a special reinforcement of non-French forces to go up north of the Ibar River into Mitrovica to try to preserve the opportunity for Albanians to live there. the reports I was getting showed that there were Albanian doctors and hospitals and other people that were forced out of the region by the Serbs. And I figure that was Serb paramilitaries or Serb special forces.
Thank you.
It's just the way Belgrade operated.
Thank you, General. Mr. President, I tender DHT 12601 to DHT 12603 into evidence.
Objection.
None, Your Honor.
DHT 12601 to 12603 is admitted.
Will be assigned exhibit number 1D00434, and it's currently classified as confidential.
It can be public.
Thank you.
Reclassified as public.
Thank you. General Clark, in your witness statement, you also discussed the demilitarization of the KLA in the summer of 1999. And in paragraph 31 of your statement, you state that General Jackson regularly convened meetings with the KLA commander Cheku and the KLA zone commanders in order to implement the demilitarization of the KLA. You discuss one such meeting that you attended when General Jackson asked you to join a JIC meeting in order to address zone commanders who were resisting efforts to fully surrender arms. My question to you is, did you have an understanding of why General Jackson couldn't just tell KLA Commander Cheku to issue an order to complete the demilitarization, and why he needed the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe to directly address zone commanders?
Well, I never actually addressed that question to General Jackson, but I knew he was having difficulty because having fought individually, having done their best to protect their own people, then following the resurgence of the Kosovar Albanians back into Kosovo, I think the KLA was able to, at that point, get people together, come together with some kind of an organization. I'd never met General Cheku before. And so I think the concern was they felt like they had been, their people had been really mistreated, and they were subject to aggression. They weren't sure whether they could trust NATO to protect them. They had seen, no doubt, that UNPROFOR under the UN in Bosnia a few years earlier was not particularly effective in protecting the Bosnian people. So I think Jackson wanted me to come down just as a further reassurance. They'd seen me on television. They knew I was the Supreme Commander. He thought I could help them understand that give up your weapons. Yes, you can still have an association. We'll call it disaster relief or something like this. But you won't be armed. You're not a military. That's over. And that was a message I conveyed in that meeting, and they bought it.
But did you have an understanding of why the zone commanders needed to be present at that meeting?
Say that again.
Did you have an understanding of why the zone commanders needed to be present at a meeting with you?
Well, I mean, yes, because this was still a pretty, I figured it was a pretty rudimentary organization. People, I assumed, it wasn't an organized military. It wasn't like the colonels gave orders to the captains and the captains gave orders to the lieutenants. These were regional, localized groups of fighters who sort of banded together to protect their communities. And someone on the outside was trying to help them get weapons. Someone was trying to probably give them training or something, but it was never really put together. So my assumption was that after NATO got in, people actually got to meet each other, got to talk, but there was no real submission to authority. These people were still like, I did my part. I risked my neck on this. You're not going to tell me what to do easily. I don't trust this, whatever. I mean, you got to understand this population. What Milosevic told me was true. I mean, they killed people. And they were subjected to systematic ethnic repression for a period of more than a decade before this, where their language was, they were forced out of government service, where the Albanian language wasn't accepted in schools and so forth. So these men who fought back, they were pretty independent-minded, I would guess. That was my impression when I met with them. I looked around the group. These were local people who risked their lives to stand up to fight against oppression.
Thank you, General.
So I think that was the purpose of my being there.
Thank you. You say in paragraph 31 of your statement that in this meeting with the zone commanders, you noted that Mr. Thaçi stood alone off to the side, ignored by the KLA fighters, and that this reinforced your view that Mr. Thaçi's influence over the KLA soldiers was limited. Is that correct?
You better ask that question again, just so I get it exactly right.
Yes. Perhaps
if you
we
come
can,
closer to the mic, it'll
yes.
be better.
Why don't we put it on the screen? 1D00430, please. And if we could go to paragraph 31, please. General, if you read paragraph 31 to yourself and tell me when you're finished, and we'll turn the page so you can finish reading the paragraph.
Okay, I got paragraph 31.
If we could turn the page, please.
Yes.
Yes. So do you recall that at this meeting, you saw Mr. Thaçi standing alone while the zone commanders huddled around you and General Cheku, and that this reinforced your view that Mr. Thaçi's influence over the KLA soldiers was limited?
Yeah, I remember looking at Thaçi because he was the spokesman. He was clean cut. He was somebody that looked more Western than the rest. A little bit. He didn't look like he'd been out in the woods fighting for for a year or two, and it was pretty clear that he wasn't in charge.
Thank you,
He
General.
was there. He was the one I knew best. I'd never met Cheku before, but I couldn't deal through Thaçi. He wasn't in charge.
Thank you, General. Mr. President, I note the time.
We'll break for lunch right now, General. We'll take an hour off for lunch, and then we'll come back at 2:30.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we do something to? It's just not. There's not enough time on this thing for me. I probably do better with my hearing aids in. I know everybody else can hear it fine. It's just not loud enough.
Did you have something you wanted on the
No, I
record?
just wanted to give you an update on time. I should have about 30 to 45 minutes left, so we should be able to get to the defense cross-examinations this afternoon.
Very good. Thank you for letting us know. We're adjourned until 1:30 or 2:30.
All rise. All rise.
Be seated. So they've done what they can to increase the amplification out of the equipment, and everybody over here, please try, and here, please try to remember to get in front of the microphone as much as possible. You can bring the witness in.
Mr. President, while we're waiting for the witness, we have checked, and the prep note 1 can be a public document, and we will have to file a public redacted version of the witness statement.
When will you do that?
We can file that by Wednesday.
Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, the document should be reclassified as public, Mr. Court Officer.
Thank you, Your Honors. In that case, the exhibit number 1D00431 will be classified as public. Thank you, Your Honors.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Very good. We continue with your testimony. Mr. Misitich has the floor. Please give him your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome back, General.
Thank you.
We left off discussing your meeting with the zone commanders in September of 1999. Are you aware that General Mike Jackson has written a book with his memoirs?
I'm aware of it. Yes, I am.
Okay. Have you read the book?
Actually, I haven't.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Court Officer, could we please have Exhibit 1D214 on the screen, please? General, I'm going to show you now an excerpt from General Jackson's book about your meeting with the zone commanders, and just ask you if it's consistent with your recollection and if you wish to comment on it.
Okay.
And if we could please go to page 2 of this exhibit. Yes, so that first full paragraph at the top, if we could blow it up so the general can read it. You see there, he says, I spoke to Wes Clark, who suggested that he should fly in to add weight to the negotiation. That seemed sensible to me. I finally got to bed at 06:30 and was up again at 10 o'clock. Wes arrived at 1400 hours, and the KLA delegation was with us 45 minutes later. Wes was in his element, working the room confidently, telling stories about his experiences in Vietnam. which had the KLA's zone commanders hanging on his every word. Afterwards, he made a rousing, virulently anti-Serb speech that would have had our diplomats reeling if they could have heard what he was saying. It became clear that the differences between the two sides had narrowed. We resolved the issue of the insignia, agreeing on an outline of the shape of Kosovo itself. Off the top of her head, our new Canadian political advisor, Wendy Gilmore, came up with a wording on one of the remaining issues, access to weapons, which satisfied everybody. More names were bandied about. Would we be prepared to call the organization the Kosovo Guard? Silence. It sounds too military, Cheku responded, and then everyone started laughing. Hey, that's meant to be my line, joked Wes, and eventually we settled on the name Kosovo Protection Corps. General Clark, do you have any comment on General Jackson's account?
It looks fine to me.
Okay. Then let me turn your attention to something else you say in your statement with respect to paragraph 33 of your statement. And if we could take this document down and put back on the screen Exhibit 1D 430, please. If we could go to paragraph 33, please. And here you're talking about the post-war violence. And you say that based on the information you had from the ground, you attributed the violence in the summer of 1999 to various factors, including hatred, score settling, revenge, blood feuds, criminal gangs, and crimes of greed and opportunity. You say that much of this chaos was the inevitable reaction to a decade and a half of Serb oppression. And based on this paragraph, I'd like to show you a video. If we could, Mr. Court Officer, have on the screen video 1D00076, please. I'm going to play the video and ask if this is consistent with what you say in paragraph 33. Just for your purposes, I'm sure you'll recognize the person, but it's a video of Mr. Ken Bacon, the spokesman of the Pentagon at the time. And it's a press briefing in the Pentagon on the 5th of June, so before Resolution 1244 and before the entry of NATO forces into Kosovo. And we can play the video.
I don't think that Kosovo is going to be a very happy place for Serbs when NATO comes in, I don't think Serbs will want to stay there. I think they want to return to Serbia. We don't know how big the Serb minority is there. It's probably about 100,000, could be a little more than that. But as Kosovar Albanians flow back in, our assumption is that many Serbs will probably return to Serbia.
It sounds like you're encouraging the Serbs who now live in Kosovo then to leave.
I'm not encouraging them at all. I'm just stating what we anticipate the facts will be.
General Clark, Mr. Bacon there says that the Pentagon anticipates that the Serbs will leave Kosovo when NATO forces enter. Can you tell us why there was an anticipation that the Serbs would want to leave Kosovo?
Ken Bacon wasn't speaking for me, and I wasn't. I never focused on that. What we focused on was reestablish a climate of order. But what you know in every circumstance like this is that if you don't have police who speak the language, who go in immediately on something like this, it gets out of control. Now, my experience started with the intervention in Haiti in 1994. And the Republicans in Congress were insistent that our U.S. military that went in after General Cedrus left and we put President Aristide back in, they said, well, you're going to do this, but we don't want our soldiers as policemen. So we wrote carefully the rules of engagement where they couldn't get involved in police activities. And it lasted one day in which the troops were there and there was some kind of violence between Haitians, and the press immediately jumped on it and said, what's the matter? The U.S. troops are standing there, they're not stopping the violence. I had to rewrite the rules of engagement and send them out through the command that afternoon. So this is what always happens in these circumstances. And I just want to make sure that the court understands this. Let me explain it a different way. In Afghanistan, when U.S. forces went into Afghanistan and NATO forces went in, again, we didn't always speak the language. We didn't always have interpreters available. People are coming up to you and say, so-and-so stole my bicycle and blah, blah, blah. And you just don't have any way of dealing with this stuff. And we were, the records on Afghanistan show that actually the U.S. forces were drawn into these kinds of quarrels between families in Afghanistan. So when we put NATO forces in Kosovo right away, and I gave very clear instructions to Mike Jackson that it was going to be peaceful and not to let reverse ethnic cleansing take place. And we deployed forces. We went to the Serb monasteries. We did everything we could to sort of hold down the violence. But, people are angry. I mean, this is life and death. This is murder. This is people whose possessions were taken away, who were fearful for their lives, who have seen their homes destroyed by neighbors and looted by neighbors. You just can't imagine the passion that was there in these people. I don't think even we understood it until I went back in with Solana. It was on or about the third week in July. We went into Pristina, and we were just going in there to visit the UN really, and stop by KFOR, and hundreds of thousands of people poured out on the streets. And it swarmed us, and there's this passion of what we did by lifting the Serb oppression was so powerful. The resentments and the fear were so deep that this kind of spontaneous violence was almost inevitable.
Thank you, General. Mr. Court Officer, if we could please have Exhibit 1D96 on the screen, please. Now, before we play this video, General, in paragraph 34 of your statement, you say that in the summer and early fall of 1999, you never received any intelligence or information that the KLA leadership had any plan to target Serbs or minorities. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You also say that you did not believe that the KLA leadership engaged in a coordinated effort to target and attack Serbs or minorities. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You also say that you do not believe that Mr. Thaçi had a motive to engage in such conduct. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I'd like to play now this video of you on PBS NewsHour on the 1st of July, 1999, so roughly 3 weeks after NATO's entry into Kosovo. I'd like to play the video for you and then ask you a few questions.
Margaret Warner has our interview with U.S. Army General Wesley Clark, the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. She spoke to him earlier this evening.
Welcome, General.
Thank you, Margaret.
I want to talk to you first about the KFOR mission in Kosovo. Secretary of State Albright said yesterday when she was up at the UN, the people of Kosovo are not safe. Is that true?
Well, I think that this is a period of sorting out that's going on. There are hundreds of thousands of people coming back. There have been some terrible things done in that country. There are all kinds of emotions running rampant. And there are Serbs still there, some of whom may have participated in that, others who are just afraid they're going to be taken for guilty because of their ethnicity. There are gypsies who are also being discriminated against. And so there's some legitimate efforts to get property back. There's some revenge taking. There's some score settling. One doesn't really know, but it's a very difficult time. Our troops are there. We're doing everything we can, but of course we're not police.
Do you think if Serbs continue to leave and they don't come back, do you think that in any way undercuts the credibility of what NATO went to war for, this multi-ethnic ideal, as you put it?
Well, I think we have to temper the ideal with reality. And we don't know how widespread Serb popular participation in the atrocities really were. And so maybe a lot of these people helped themselves to their neighbor's property, participated in some masked banditry and worse mischief while the ethnic cleansing was going on. We just don't know. And so some of the people that are leaving may well consider themselves as real targets for international justice as well as for Albanian revenge. So it's a little hard to generalize. But as I said, the ideal is we'd like to promote a multi-ethnic society. And by the way, the KLA leadership has called for the same thing.
And do you think they're genuine?
I think they are.
Okay, so General, there you said on the 1st of July, 1999, that you thought the KLA leadership was genuine in its call for a multi-ethnic society. And you have clarified in the preparation session that we held that by implication, this also includes Mr. Thaçi. My question to you is, did you ever receive any other briefing, information, or intelligence which led you to subsequently change your conclusion that the KLA leadership and Mr. Thaçi were in favor of a multi-ethnic Kosovo?
No, I never received any information that would contradict what I said in that video. But I do want to, if I could, take just a minute to explain to the court, to give you an example of what these feelings were like at the time. So sometime in, must have been mid-April, our A-10 pilots overhead flying in Kosovo during the air campaign saw a column of tractors in the vicinity of Drenica, and these tractors were loaded with people. Now we're flying at over 20,000 feet, so they're looking down with 10-power binoculars. That's all we had. And they're seeing this column of tractors with people on it stopping at homes, and the homes are then set on fire. And we're like, what is this? So the pilot came in and he attacked the column of tractors, thinking these were Serbs that were going and attacking the Albanians. The next day, Milosevic brought the International Press Corps down to look at the scene. And it turned out that the people on the tractors, or at least as the way it was set up by the Serbs, these were farmers that were killed by our own aircraft. So we did an investigation. The pilots swore that they would not have mistaken this. They were brokenhearted when they were confronted with the facts. And years later, when I travel around, sometimes people come and visit me, and Albanians talk to me and so forth. 2 or 3 years ago, a guy I met in an airport said, "Yeah, I was in that column on those tractors." I said, "You were in the column on the tractors in Drenica when you were attacked by the..." He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, why were you burning homes?" He said, "Oh, we would burn those homes because the Serbs were going to come in and take those homes, and we didn't want the Serbs to have them." I said, "Okay, I guess that's the explanation." I mean, that's what the feelings were, the anger, the passion, the fear. Just have to appreciate what this was like. for the people on the ground in Kosovo. So fearful, so determined that they would, burn their own property rather than let the Serbs have it. So, yeah, it was really tough to tell people afterwards, just settle down, everything's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. The police will take care of everything. There were no police. So.
Thank you, General. I would like to ask you to explain to the court how you received information about what was happening in Kosovo and what kind of information you received. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go step by step and first ask you, would you read lower level reports of incidents that were occurring on the ground?
Yeah, well, let's talk about when this was. So basically, I got all of the incident reports. I tried to read as much raw intel as I could. And, the intel folks knew I was really interested in Kosovo, so I got a lot of stuff on it.
In the summer of 1999?
Yeah, summer of 1990, starting in the summer of 1998.
And
I was reading as much as I could, every incident report that we could get. And so yeah, and on into the summer of 99, of course.
Thank you. Would you receive intelligence reports and reports from K4 commanders?
Yes, yes,
Before going into Kosovo, in country, would you receive briefings?
yes,
Once in Kosovo, would you receive a personal briefing from General Jackson?
yes, yeah.
Did you consider yourself fully informed about what was happening on the ground?
I consider myself as fully informed as I could be, given that I was a strategic commander. Mike was on the ground, he was the operational commander. So he was in it day to day, hour by hour, living there. So I'm sure he knew more than I did.
Okay. Okay, then let me turn to a document, and Mr. President, due to provider restrictions, I would ask that we go into private session.
Into private session, Mr. Court Officer.
Your Honors, we're in public session. Thank you.
Thank you. General Clark, in paragraph 52 of your statement, you say that you do not believe it would be just to attribute the misconduct of others to Mr. Thaçi. Could you please explain why you feel that way?
I don't think Mr. Thaçi had control over this, over the people that were doing this. I mean, first of all, it's not clear that the violence was perpetrated by KLA members in the first place. A lot of this is just individual people, as far as we could determine. And I talked to Mike Jackson about this, and he was obviously talking to his commanders, and they were in contact with the KLA people who were in the various zones and areas of responsibility. So I don't think it was KLA, but even if it was, there was no control. There was no control mechanism here when this thing happened. It's not something that where you could give an order and expect it to be obeyed. These are people who were in a resistance mode, fighting for their lives. You know, I look at, if you look at comparable histories of other circumstances like this, and there's just a wonderful volume put out on the American Revolution, and you look at what happened in the American Revolution, you see the same kind of sort of passions free against the British, in this case, by the American colonists who had, once they had felt the weight of what the British were about, and they found some traitors or loyalists among their group, they took action. It wasn't anything organized, it just happened. And that's the way these things happen, as far as I can tell. And we never had any information. We wanted to stop it. Believe me, if we had had information that was organized by the KLA, we would put our foot down really hard on it. We didn't have that information. We thought the KLA was helping us. And you have to understand at this time, the KLA understood very clearly that they would not have what they had, which was the removal of Serb forces, had it not been for NATO. And they had no means to protect themselves against a resurgence of Serb forces coming back in if NATO and KFOR weren't there. So this was a pretty clear case of the motive being they should listen to and do what KFOR said as best they could. And I think that's what was happening.
Thank you, General, for answering my questions. That concludes my direct examination. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dixon?
Thank you, Your Honors. I do have just a few questions.
No problem. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, General Clark. My name is Rodney Dixon. I act for Mr. Kadri Vaseli, and I've just got a few additional questions to ask you. I hope my voice is clear enough.
When you turn toward the mic, it's a lot more clear.
Right. I'll make sure I do that.
I got it turned up. Okay.
Thank you. General Clark, you were asked a number of questions earlier about the wave of violence in the summer of 1999, and you gave evidence about what were the causes of that. You, in a further interview with the defense for Mr. Thaçi, gave some information about that, which was recorded in what we call Preparation Note 2. Do you remember that note which was read back to you, which you confirmed?
What specifically was that note? Read it to me so
Okay,
I can...
I'll do that.
Okay.
That might be the quickest way. I'll read out what you said to see whether this is your statement.
Yeah.
You said that it was not just about revenge. And I'm reading from paragraph 2 here for those following in the court. So not just about revenge. The Albanian population owned more of the land, and there was an element among the Serbs of, in inverted commas, you have something we want. Starting with the death of Tito, Serbian nationalism had been raging for 15 years, including the expectation they were the superior civilization and were pushing the Albanians out of their own civilization and governments. It was ethnic cleansing at all levels, not just government, but also neighbor to neighbor. When NATO came in to enforce a more equitable solution, a lot of people who had been committed to ethnic cleansing therefore would have wanted to depart. Is that an accurate account of your evidence?
Yes.
And when you say here that a lot of people who had been committed to ethnic cleansing therefore would have wanted to depart, are you referring to parts of the Serb population in Kosovo wanting to leave?
No, that's my expectation.
Yes, and do you know if that happened in reality?
You know, we never had really accurate population statistics because the population statistics were politically motivated. So we never really knew whether there were 200,000 Serbs there or 100,000 Serbs. No one ever knew. No one could tell us because we knew that, I think, my memory's right here, the last census was like 1990 or 1990. I think it was 1990. And so Milosevic and his people had rigged the population census to show what they wanted to show.
Yes. And you were aware, as you've said here, that there were significant land disputes in the territory of Kosovo.
Well, just in general. No, I don't know I don't know the specific land disputes. What I know is that there was some envy and some land grabbing and some barn grabbing and some equipment grabbing and so forth when the conflict started and the Kosovar population was being ethnically cleansed. There were Serbs there. We got reports of them taking advantage, stealing property and that kind of thing. But in general, of course, let me just digress here and just talk a little more broadly about this. Mm-hmm. So I've done a lot in Eastern Europe, and I've looked at it for many, many years. I was fluent in Russian from courses at West Point. I went to the Soviet Union in 1964, spent 10 days traveling around. I did the first U.S.-Russian joint staff talks, the first U.S.-Ukrainian joint staff talks when I was J5 in the 90s. I visited Moscow. I knew Russian generals, went and looked at Russian training, and had a pretty good sense for Eastern Europe. And I also was stationed in Germany during the Cold War, did my homework, and so forth. There's a sort of pan-Slavism that emerged in the 19th century that never really went away in Eastern Europe. And I think that that pan-Slavism was reflected in many ways. When I talked to the Romanian Minister of Defense in 1998, and I asked him whether they wanted to be members of NATO, he said, "Of course." And I said, "Why? Does it have anything to do with Russia?" He said, "Of course." And I asked him, could he describe some incidents or something that I could explain this to Washington? And he said, "Certainly." And I thought he was going to tell me that the Russian ambassador had pushed him at a conference or something and been rude to him. Instead, he said, in 1878, we allowed the Russian forces to come through en route to what was later Yugoslavia, and they came back and stole our province of Bessarabia from us. And when I was in Bulgaria during the time I was NATO commander, the foreign minister told me, she said, today Russia's weak, but someday Russia will be strong again. And before then, Bulgaria must be in NATO. And you're asking yourself, why is this? What is this? And today, you see the very same manifestations in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And I don't mean to lecture here, I just want to explain that there's a sort of gradient of superiority that runs from Moscow out and down. So if you're not native Russian and you're a lesser Slav, you're lesser. And if you're not a Slav, you're not a human being. And I think these Albanian people were basically treated that way, and they felt that way. And I think that's the way they were handled by their Serb neighbors. Just a sort of ethnic superiority that was enforced.
Yes, thank you, General Clark, for that explanation. I wanted to ask you about another matter in the preparation note, and that's at paragraphs 6, 7, and 8. Don't worry, you don't need to look at it. I'll read it out again just to confirm that that is your evidence. This is in relation to questions you were asked about the information, the raw information that you had available to you during your time there in 98 and 99, and whether you thought there were any gaps in your knowledge. You said, when asked to explain how you received information, you stated that he read just about every report that was written. You received message traffic that you read every morning, and also received reports including incident and intelligence reports, as well as reports from commanders. He cannot remember every single incident today, but he was fully informed of them at the time. Before going to Kosovo, you would be totally briefed up. Once in Kosovo, you would also receive General Jackson's personal impressions, although you did not think that General Jackson would have more information than you. You would then be briefed with a series of tools. There may have been PowerPoints, but also various reports, lists of incidents, etc. He would already be familiar with the locations, the names of villages, the friction points, and the names of the actors involved. It was a day-by-day effort on your part to keep up with what was going on in Kosovo. So once on the ground, he would always have asked General Jackson for his impressions and opinions, but you would also have been informed by his team beforehand. And then you went on to say that it was absolutely not possible for the KLA to have a functioning chain of command from the top to the bottom without NATO and the United States being aware of it. Is that a correct and accurate account of your evidence?
Yes.
Objection, that's a compound question, and at least the second sentence of paragraph 7 is contradicted by page 59 of the real-time transcript.
Sustained.
Well, I've asked him if that's his evidence. He can say whether he agrees with it or not.
Well, I want to clarify something. I don't want to say that I knew more than Jackson did. I want to say that the imagery, the electronic stuff that I got might have been more than Jackson got. But Jackson was on the ground, and people would have said things to him that he might or might not have reported. But if it was an incident, it came up in an intelligence summary.
Yes, and my question really was, what I was putting to you was that you had previously said that these were all the sources of your information, the ones that I've read out. Are they the correct description of the sources that you had access to on a day-by-day basis?
Yes, I had secret intelligence, I had top secret intelligence, I had stuff that can't be talked about, I had incident reports, I had diplomatic cables, we were hearing from the United Nations and Bernard Kouchner and so forth. Yeah.
And that information that you've described there in some detail, that would have included any information that was available about the KLA itself?
Oh, of course. If we'd ever had information that the KLA was doing this thing, we'd have come down really hard on them.
And that information would have also included any documents produced by the KLA, would it not have?
I would think so. I don't remember seeing any KLA documents.
But the sources would have, if they had them, they would have described them and given you that information, is that right?
I would think so.
There's just one final matter, General, that I wanted to ask you about, and that was in relation to what you said in your evidence earlier on today when you were looking at whether or not you had forward observers who could provide information about strikes. This was during the NATO bombings in March 1999, so that no mistakes would be made. And I just wanted to ask you a few questions so to be clear about this. You were saying that you didn't have any forward observers from any quarter of the KLA, is that right?
That's right.
So you didn't have any information about Serb positions at that time from any quarter of the KLA, is that right?
That's right.
And when you say here that your intelligence guys had identified a Serb headquarters, you highlighted that as one example. That was information that had been given to you by your intelligence service. It wasn't any information that you received from the KLA, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, General. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you,
Your
Mr.
Honours.
Dixon. Mr. Roberts.
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Ellis.
Yes, around 10 minutes, if I may, Your Honour. Good afternoon, General. My name is Aidan Ellis, and I represent Mr. Jakub Kuznici. I'm trying to angle the microphone as best I can, but you'll, of course, let me know if you don't
got you loud and clear.
Great. So I have a couple of questions for you based on the statement that you gave to the Thaçi defence. If we could have on the screen, please, what's now been admitted as 1D00430. And it's paragraph 26 on page DHT 12552. And I'll read it to you as well, General. It says, during the war, however, I would regularly give interviews and make statements praising the KLA as a well-organized force. In actuality, that was not the case. The intended audience of my comments was Milosevic. I knew he would be listening. I needed to project strength to Milosevic to hasten his surrender. The statements did not reflect NATO's or my assessment of the KLA's actual military capacities. Do you recall giving that evidence to the Thaçi defence?
Yes.
And it's normal, isn't it, General, in a conflict to use public statements to project strength to your adversaries?
Well, it should be normal. If you're not doing it, you're not using one of the principal tools. In this case, based on my relationship with Milosevic and what we knew was going on in Belgrade, I knew that he was listening to me. The night of the first strikes, his generals told him that they had shot down several NATO aircraft. And then I had to give a press conference saying there had been no losses. And so we knew that I had certain credibility with Milosevic. And that's why I always said, we're winning, he's losing, and he knows it. And so, yes, I was going to use whatever instruments of information warfare I could use to persuade Milosevic to stop. And in fact, I'll just share this with the court. Admiral Jim Ellis, early on in the bombing campaign, had dinner. He was the commander in Naples of the southern side of NATO. And he was my direct subordinate. Jackson actually worked for Ellis in the theater. And Ellis had dinner with an Italian retired general who had fought the Albanians in 1942 when Italy invaded Albania. And the retired Italian general went on at great length about how vicious and barbaric these Albanians were, and how they instilled deep fear in the Italian soldiers in that campaign. So I thought that might have carried over a little bit to the Serbs and their concerns about actually coming face to face with the KLA. And so I built up the KLA for that reason. Lost you. Yep.
There we go. It's right, isn't it, that the instruments of information warfare can include making statements exaggerating your own military strength and organization?
Happens every day.
And it can also involve speaking as though you have clear knowledge of the situation on the ground, even if perhaps the information you receive is incomplete in reality.
Correct.
Could I have on the screen, please, DHT 05384? There should be both a video and a transcript, please. Thank you. Are we able to have that on part of the screen and the transcript on the other part? Thank you. If we could play the video from 0 and 54 seconds, please.
The thing about the situation on the ground is that despite the statements of President Milosevic and the boasts of his military leaders some 2 months ago, they did not finish off the KLA in 5 to 7 days. They, in fact, have made the KLA even stronger than it was before. It's very much a functional organization. It has a strengthened command and control. It has increased manpower, and it's very much still active throughout Kosovo.
I think we can leave it there. Thank you. First of all, General, is that you we see in the video making that statement?
Yes. Yep.
And would you agree with me that this is an example of what we've just discussed, making a public statement exaggerating the strength and organization of the KLA?
Yeah, but I do think they received additional support. I do think people joined it during the fight because they had to, and I do think that they were doing the best they could to put command and control together in there. They just weren't very successful at it by our standards. Yeah. In other words, they could know where there was, I think the KLA might have known where there was specific, really cruel Serb attacks on the population, but to be able to actually do a coordinated response, to report it to NATO, to do anything like this, no, it wasn't getting through.
Exactly. The sentiment that this was very much a functional organization was not your assessment of their military capacity at the time.
No, that was my wish list.
Yes. That can come down, thank you. I just want to ask you finally about another paragraph in your witness statement, which was 1D 430, paragraph 19 this time, which is 12550. Oh, I'm sorry, paragraph 18. No. It's right, isn't it, that you were sent to meet with Milosevic after the massacre at Rečak?
That's right.
And at that time, the international community wanted the ICTY to be allowed to investigate, whereas Milosevic wanted his own people to do it.
That's right.
Before lunch, you spoke a little bit about Serbian disinformation after the conflict. And I think you referred a moment ago to rigging a population census before the conflict.
That's right.
It's right, isn't it, that there was also Serbian disinformation during the conflict in 98-99?
No doubt about it.
And the reason that you and the international community didn't want Milosevic's people to do the investigation into Rečak is because you understood that there was a risk they would tamper with the evidence or would look to blame the KLA for what had happened.
Look, when Milosevic, when I asked him to have the International Criminal Tribunal come in, he said no. He said, we're already doing the investigation. He said, and I know what it will show. I said, well, Mr. President, if you already know what the outcome is, what kind of an investigation is it? He says, I know what the outcome is, you see. So, I mean, it wasn't any concern about disinformation. He was going to tell you he was going to rig the investigation.
Thank you, General. Those are my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. We're gonna take the 10-minute break. General, we'll give you a 10-minute comfort break, and then we'll come back to the courtroom.
Thank you. It's working really well now.
We'll be adjourned for 10 minutes.
All rise. All rise.
Be seated. You can bring the witness in. All right, General Clark, we begin now with the cross-examination by Mr. Halling from the Special Prosecutor's Office.
Good afternoon, General Clark. We haven't met before, but my name's Matt Halling, and I'm a prosecutor with the SPO. Can you hear me all right?
Got you loud and clear.
Thank you. The first item we would like to show the General, I'll give the ERN now, is video 129433-19, and from timestamp 7 minutes 52 seconds to 8 minutes 58 seconds. And then on the other half of the screen, the transcript page 129433-19-TR-ET, page 3. General, I'd like to start with your understanding of the KLA. You were talking earlier today about the Adam Yashari attack. This is at pages 15 and 16 of the real-time transcript. You gave an interview in July 2022 with David Rappaport. There was part of it that I wanted to direct you to and then ask a question.
Okay.
So with that in mind, if the court officer could please play the video.
Young people who call themselves the Kosovo Liberation Army decided that Serbia was just oppressive, and they did small things like ambush a couple of policemen and so forth, and the Serbs cracked down brutally. It was a real effort to go after them. And in February of 1998, they went after they considered the ringleader, a man named Adam Jashari. Like many Albanians, he had an extended family, he owned property. And so anyway, they were besieged by the Serb police. The Serb police put 2 rings around his farmhouse, one ring facing in and one ring facing out, so none of his neighbors could interfere, and they put him under siege. And anyway, when they broke in, they lined the people up on the floor and shot them. Women, children, babies, right through the head. So this was an explosive incident, and it really triggered the start of what later became the Kosovo Action for NATO. From that moment on, the Serbs escalated their oppression. This also spurred the recruitment for the Kosovo Liberation Army. And Albania, who was not directly involved in this.
Yes. So, General, in the video played, you're describing the same Adam Yashari incident that you discussed in your testimony, and this occurred in the first part of 1998, correct?
Correct.
Now, when you talk about then the KLA doing small things like ambush a couple of policemen and so forth, you're talking about what the KLA was doing then before February 1998.
Yes. No, I'm not sure on that, because I don't know if that was before or after. I know it was before we entered in the summer of 1999, or in the spring of 1999. But so I don't have the specific incidents, and I don't have the specific dates.
All right. With that in mind, if we could put Communique 36 on the screen, this is P279, and if we can have it in English and Albanian. Now, witness, you were saying earlier today also that you don't remember seeing any KLA documents.
That's right.
Yes. So I'll just wait for the English version to be put on the screen as well. So I understand from what you were saying earlier today that you've not seen a KLA communique or a declaration like this before.
I never saw this.
Yes. So here at the beginning, it's talking about 11 and 12 September 1997. By decision of the Central Staff, the KLA armed units carried out a synchronized operation throughout the whole first operative zone. The operations were carried out in the subregions of Drenica, Ernik, Pastrik, Dukagini, Karadak, and Lapi. They attacked in a lightning operation the police station's in, and then 12 locations are listed. Is this synchronized attack on 12 police stations the sort of ambush of a couple of policemen you were referencing in your interview?
Well, it could be. But, you know, the information that got out may be different than the information that they're communicating here. I don't remember ever seeing, well, let's see, I would just have become NATO commander a couple of months before. I don't remember seeing anything that indicated synchronized operations by the KLA, at least that we knew about at NATO.
So I understand from your answer then, you wouldn't know if this ambush was done with RPGs.
I wouldn't know whether it was a synchronized ambush or not. It would have been reported as an incident of something. Maybe they did have RPGs. If we knew it, it would have been reported. But I don't remember seeing any notice of this.
You just said maybe it was done with RPGs, but I understand.
Well, you said RPGs.
You wouldn't.
I don't know.
You wouldn't know who would have obtained such weapons, correct?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question. If you're I haven't read the whole thing, but if you say that they say that they attacked with RPGs, then they must have gotten the RPGs from someone, and probably they would have come from the Serbs themselves.
Putting aside the communique, did you ever hear about the KLA general staff or central staff taking credit for other actions like this one?
I did not.
Okay. Your Honors, at this point, we would like to admit the video extract. And so again, for the record, that's 129433-19. Just timestamp 7 minutes, 52 seconds to 8 minutes, 58 seconds. And for the transcript, it would just be the first page, just to see what the interview is, and then page 3.
Any objection?
No objection.
129433-19 from timestamp 7:52 to 8:58 is admitted. And also 129433-19-TRET, page 3 is admitted.
Yes, and page 1 as well, Your Honor, just so to see who the interview is with. Correct. Page 1 and 3.
Admitted.
And there will be assigned exhibit number P04512. They're currently classified as confidential.
These can be public.
Reclassified as public.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now for the court officer, the next item that I'm going to pull up is SPOE 00406-173 to 00406-230. General, I wanted to ask you, are you familiar with a book by a man named Henry Parrott entitled Kosovo Liberation Army, The Inside Story of an Insurgency?
I haven't read that book.
The Thaçi defense had notified to us of an intent to show it to you, but there were a couple of aspects of this book that I wanted to ask you about. I'll just wait for it to be put up on the screen. The first page, when it's ready. If we can now go to page SPOE 00406-177, just to start with the acknowledgments in the book so that you're familiar with who the author is crediting, you can see in the second paragraph on the page, if we scroll down, you can see sort of towards the middle that before long, Hashim Thaçi and Commander Remy also expressed enthusiastic encouragement and support, and we were off and running. He's explaining how he made the book. And if we go to the next page, we can see on the left side with the people who are kind enough to work through chapter drafts, Hashim Thaçi is listed there. And I'll spare you the names, but there are also multiple people on this page credited providing information in the book who are also current or former defense team members in this case. But the page I want to ask
Mr. President,
you...
can I ask
it's very interesting. They've got Dave Grange and Bill Nash, two U.S. generals who were never in Kosovo.
Mr. President, my objection is to the extra commentary. It's the second time that Mr. Holling has attempted to insert commentary to the witness that's unnecessary, and I object.
We're just trying to orient the general as to where this book has come from.
Objection's overruled at this time, but let's be careful.
Yes. The page now to go to would be SPOE 00406218. And if we scroll down the page 62 on the left side, there's something here that says KLA Strategic Goals and Objectives. And Mr. Parrott says the following. I'll only focus on the two objectives I'm interested in. Objective 3, KLA's goal of eliminate key members of the Serb police, military, and security apparatus, including ethnic Albanian collaborators and spies. And then if we go up to the top of the page again, and on the right side, number 7, build international sympathy by implanting into geopolitical discourse the ideas that the Serb forces in Kosovo represented a foreign occupation and persistently violated human rights, that resistance was building and could not be eliminated, and that the KLA fighters were not terrorists. The author then adds, the KLA did not confront as sharp an internal inconsistency in pursuing its objectives as Milosevic did in pursuing his. The principal strategic problem for the KLA was to manage the conflict between the third objective and the seventh. In the end, it managed to do that masterfully, although post-war prosecution of KLA leaders reopens the issue of whether the KLA legitimately pursued the third objection. General, were you aware that these were goals of the KLA?
I wasn't aware of these specific goals, but they do only make sense. And I never assumed that the KLA had no strategy or no intent. It's one of the things that you have to wrestle with in something like this. But when I looked at the balance of evidence that was available to me, what was happening on the ground, what the implications were in Bosnia, for the military mission and stabilization mission in Bosnia, as well as the human rights considerations in Kosovo, it seemed to me that the balance was pretty clear.
I wanted to go to one other page of this book just to see how this also compares with the evidence you received. SPOE 00406-188. And it should be on the right side of the screen where the paragraph provides Thaçi often was the bridge between the planners in exile and the defenders at home. A thinker and a political guy, he appears in some photographs in a jacket and tie with everyone else around the table in military uniform. But he also was a fighter. He stayed in Yashari's house in 1992 for 2 months after the Serbs came to arrest him. He and Yashari held a rifle and had their pictures taken together. Later, Thaçi was a constant presence on the battlefield, who often participated in armed conflict and thereby earned respect from both KLA camps. This information didn't come to your attention, did it?
Not the way it's presented exactly in the book, but I always had the impression that, yes, there were people on the outside of Kosovo who wanted to get rid of the Serb oppression. And Thaçi was a guy who was coming in and out of Switzerland and other places. And yeah, we presumed him to be the contact. Now, the details of how it worked, I didn't have, no. But I don't see anything in this, I have to say, that it doesn't seem surprising to me. I mean, we never thought that the people in Kosovo had no connection to the outside, no thought of a strategy, that they were simply people who were the average farmer would occasionally shoot at a policeman. We always knew there was something more than that behind it. But, you know, if I can just reflect on this, I mean, the American Revolution had a lot of bold talk and strategies and so forth done by the Continental Congress, and yet they didn't exactly have an effective command and control arrangement for a long time. So the fact that there's someone literate writing things like this and can think through the thing logically is not necessarily an indication that they have effective command and control. And I think that's the point that you're asking me to comment on.
Mike, that wasn't my question. My question is whether you had this information before. If we could go to SPOE 00406215. This passage references a picture of Hashim Thaçi and Adam Yashari. And on the lower right-hand corner, have you ever seen that picture of
No, I
Hashim
haven't.
Thaçi holding a weapon with Adam Yashari?
No, I haven't. No.
You actually don't know if Hashim Thaçi fought or not. You only know that people told you he was a political leader, correct?
That's right.
Your Honor, we would like to admit the pages of the book that were used with the witness. So this would be from within SPOE 00406173 to 00406230, the acknowledgments pages, which are SPOE 00406177 to 178, and the pages used then 188, 215, and 218 are the last three numbers of each ERN.
Any objection?
No objection.
So from SPOE 00406173 to 00406230, pages 177 to 178, page 406188, and 406215, and 406218 are all admitted.
Thank you, Your Honors. Those 6 numbers will be admitted with the exhibit number P04513. They are currently classified as public. Thank you.
Thank you. General, earlier today you were talking about how you stayed actively engaged throughout 1998 about what was happening in Kosovo, correct? You nodded, but just to note for the record so it appears on the transcript.
Yes, I did.
Thank you. Were you aware of attacks by the KLA against civilians in the summer of 1998?
I may have heard about this. I don't have a specific recollection of an incident, but it does sort of ring a bell.
If I could just name a few incidents just to see if it refreshes your recollection. Did you hear allegations that the KLA kidnapped and murdered Serbian mine workers at Bardi Mod, also known as Belasevac, in mid-1998?
I didn't hear that.
Were you aware of the KLA kidnapping and killing Serbian civilians in July 1998 in connection with its offensive at Rahavac, which is also known as Orahavac?
I did not hear that.
I'll try one more. Were you aware of the KLA detaining a political delegation at Chirez in September 1998?
I did not hear that.
Okay. When you said that you don't remember seeing any KLA documents then, am I correct that that means that you're not familiar with the contents of any KLA regulations?
That's correct.
Same with any orders or reports or any minutes or information from KLA meetings?
That's right.
Can you identify any KLA General Staff commanders or deputy commanders?
At the time this was going on, no. Now, when I met the first time with the KLA, let me back up. The Russians, I had a Russian deputy as NATO commander, And as the action was heating up in the fall of 1998, and we were concerned about putting an activation order and so forth, he brought into me the Russian view. And he said, the KLA doesn't really exist. He said, these people are all Chechen terrorists. And I said, well, can you give me some evidence on this? I'm happy to look at it. So a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks later, he brought in a book of purporting to show that the KLA was filled with Chechens. And he sort of, I looked at it, I said, it doesn't track with anything I've read. He sort of smirked and indicated that he knew it was complete disinformation from Russian intelligence. Now maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you've got information. There were Chechens in there, but I've never heard it from any source but the Russians. So there was active efforts on many sides to sort of see who these people were and what they were. The first time I met them and the first time the names meant anything to me was when I met the delegation during the Rambouillet talks. And even then, there were, I think, eight of them. But their positions and so forth, they may have said them, but it didn't mean anything to me.
What were the names of the KLA zone commanders you met at the Rambouillet talks?
I don't know if they were zone commanders, and I don't remember who all was there. Maybe Ramush Hardnai was there. I don't remember.
Do you know the names of the KLA's operative zones, the names that they gave them?
No.
And you mentioned Ramush Haradinaj. Do you know where in Kosovo he commanded or how he was appointed?
No.
Okay.
But again, I haven't read the book. And maybe someone in our intelligence agency was collecting this information, or maybe we were just woefully deficient in intelligence collection. But I never saw any of that.
So am I correct that the first meeting that you were speaking with zone commanders was the meeting just before the end of the demilitarization period, which would be in September 1999? Is that right?
I don't know. I'm not sure who was there. I think we quoted a 4 August meeting, and that may have had commanders in it as well.
Okay, but in that meeting, you talk about meeting with Hashim Thaçi and Agim Cheku. You don't remember meeting any zone commanders before that meeting you were describing earlier in your evidence with the Thaçi defense about demilitarization?
I don't remember, because when you go into a meeting like this and there's people sitting around the table, you often don't know everybody in the room. And unless you've written it down, you wouldn't remember the names.
I understand. Again, just to try some names to see if it does refresh your recollection. Have you heard of someone named Azam Sula?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Sokol Bashoda?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Now, you mentioned in your preparation session that you didn't know very much about Kadri Veseli, Recep Salimi, or Jakub Krasniqi.
No, but I'd seen those names before.
Do you know what any of their responsibilities were during the war?
No.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the way that NATO worked at the time you were describing in your statement. But before getting to that, just to talk about the statement itself, are you able to approximate how many times you met with the Thaçi defense in the taking of the statement that you have been shown at various points today?
Maybe 3 times.
Have you ever been informed of what crimes are charged in this case?
Not specifically.
I think that answers my next question, but just to be sure, have you read the indictment or any of the pretrial briefs in this case?
I've not.
Now, getting back to NATO, you talked about the degree of the information that you received. And you also talked in your statement about getting information from seasoned and experienced people on the ground. And this is also including intelligence information. That's right. Now, again, you nodded, but just to note for the
Yes,
transcript.
yes.
Thank you. Was that intelligence information that you got during the air campaign ever wrong?
Hard to say. Must have been wrong in some cases. The information about the headquarters was wrong, but it was validated. We flew over the thing for 2 days to look at it before we struck it. So, yeah, but you don't always get everything right.
Now, when you say the information about the headquarters was wrong, can you explain a little more about the incident that you're recalling there?
Yeah, there was a what later turned out to be a collection point run by the Serb military, or maybe by the MUP, in which Albanian civilians were put inside a building. The building was surrounded by Serb vehicles, and there were some radio transmissions and so forth from there. And from that, it was surmised that this was a Serb regional headquarters of some type. And so it was taken out as a target. And it turned out that we killed, I think the number was 80 innocent civilians.
And you consider that to be a failure of intelligence that you weren't able to know?
Absolutely.
And in your position as Saker, and you talked about command and control quite a bit earlier today, it was you who had command and control over the NATO forces throughout the air campaign and the KLA demilitarization, yes?
Yeah, I had strategic control.
Now, in the context of military command and control, there are disagreements. Is that right?
That's right.
And actually, you said once in the past that wars are punctuated by sharp disagreements of judgment. The goal is victory. Do you still believe that?
Yeah.
These disagreements could extend to subordinates not following your orders.
They could.
Now, you talked earlier, and this is on page 34 of the real-time transcript, about the Pristina airfield. I want to ask a couple more questions about this. General Mike Jackson, as KFOR commander, he was one of your subordinates, yes?
He was actually not my direct subordinate. Admiral Jim Ellis was my subordinate. He was Jim Ellis's subordinate. Let's be very clear on that.
But in the context of the chain of command you were in, you were authorized to give direct orders to General Jackson.
I did not give direct orders. I gave them through Admiral Ellis.
Okay. Is it true, though, that you ordered General Jackson in June 1999 to take the Pristina airport ahead of a Russian effort to do the same?
Not quite.
Please explain where it is correct.
So, on Tuesday, June the 7th, I had a call from the French Chief of Defense who said, something's going on with Pristina Airfield. I said, what? He said, something's going to happen there. I don't know what it is. The next morning in my video teleconference with Admiral Ellis and Mike Jackson, I mentioned this report and asked General Jackson to be prepared for some contingency, however he would respond, whatever he thought that was, and to brief me on the plan. That was on Wednesday. On Thursday, I didn't get a briefing on the plan. And on Friday, when the Russians withdrew their battalion from Bosnia and started toward Kosovo, Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State, was there, and it was difficult to reach Admiral Ellis. I couldn't get him. He was tied up with her. So Mike Jackson, I had given Mike a warning order to be prepared, but I wanted to be briefed on what his plan was because I didn't know what the plan was. So he then went through British channels to tell his chief of defense that he thought it was a bad idea to execute his plan. Well and good. I'd never seen his plan. I gave no such order to execute his plan and would not have done so without seeing it.
Yes. Now, if we could ask the court officer to please pull up DHT 11103 to DHT 11632 at page DHT 11538. General, you wrote a book called Waging Modern War, correct?
Yes, I did.
And I want to show you a page of the book where you're recounting some of the exchange with General Jackson. And on the page in question, and I'll just wait for a moment for it to appear on the screen. Yeah, so it's 11538. Yes. So if we scroll down a little, so here you're describing the sequence of events related to the incident we've been discussing. Saker, can I have a word with you in my office now? Jackson said as we were leaving the briefing. Once inside, it was a frank discussion. Amidst the serious issues, Jackson seemed angry and upset. There was a lot of emotion. I had expected to discuss the issues. I hadn't expected the emotional tenor, but I probably should have. And then a little further down the page, it says, "Sir, I'm not taking any more orders from Washington," Jackson said. "Mike, these aren't Washington's orders. They're coming from me." "By whose authority?" "By my authority as Saker." "You don't have that authority." "I do have that authority. I have the Secretary General behind me on this. Sir, I'm not starting World War III for you."
Well, now, it wasn't said, if I could just explain, it wasn't exactly said like that.
It's your book. How was it said?
Well, one of the things that you get in trouble for is writing your own book. So this is a very, very famous line that's done a lot in many and used many times. But it was not said as you said it, like, "Sir, I'm not starting World War III for you." I can promise you, it was said in a much more provocative way. And so, as I say here, I tried to turn down the temperature. Now, what I was trying to do was prevent a confrontation because we were hearing reports that the Russians were loading aircraft and preparing to bring in their forces into Pristina Airfield. And I want to just, if you want to get the full, I'm not quite sure what you're driving. I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead and ask the question, then I'll go back and fill in what's missing.
The question that I have is just, you are talking to someone who is downstream from you in the chain of command, and you're talking about an order, you called it a warning order in an earlier answer, and he wasn't doing it. That's fair to say, isn't it?
No, it isn't. He actually, he didn't execute the mission on Friday. I never gave him an order to execute it. Now, this was something entirely different. This was a different incident. Can I explain that?
Go ahead.
So, on the morning of Friday, June 11th, when I called, when I found out the Russians had left, I called the Secretary General. He said, "Well, can't you put some troops in there and take that airfield in Pristina before the Russians get there?" And I said, "We'll try." I called back to the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense couldn't be disturbed. The Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs said, "Well, why don't you just put an officer up there and see what's going on?" Well, that wasn't going to work. And so that's when I tried to get a hold of Mike Jackson. But he told me he had a plan, but I didn't know what the plan was. And before I could ever find out what the plan was, everybody was awake by that time. And so the British Chief of Defense had talked to the Secretary of Defense or the British, maybe Minister of Defense, and they decided just to let the Russians do what they're going to do. Forget about it. So that's why nothing happened on Friday. Jackson told me not to worry. He would have his forces there early on Saturday morning. I said, well, when will they start? He said, well, right away. So at 8 o'clock, nothing happened. 10 o'clock, nothing happened. At noon, almost nothing was moving. And I later, I asked Mike what was going on. He just couldn't get these forces moving. And so he finally got to the airfield. It must have been around 5 or 6 o'clock. And he went onto the airfield, and he was, according to, this is his report to me, there was a Russian BMP that circled his Humvee, and he decided to leave the airfield rather than get in trouble with the Russians. And so nothing was done. So the instructions that I had hoped he would follow were to get to the airfield and be on the airfield so that they couldn't reinforce. Now that he couldn't do. Then I got a call from Washington saying, just have him land a couple of helicopters or a helicopter on the airfield to block the runway. So I passed this to Admiral Ellis. Admiral Ellis passed it to Jackson. About 10 p.m. that night, Ellis called me back and said, Jackson is refusing to put the helicopter there. He says it's too dangerous because there's thunderstorms in the area. And so I said, okay, well, don't worry about it. I'm flying down the next morning and I'll see Jackson. So that's where it was left. Now, then the question was, what were we going to do about blocking the runways? And that's where we got into this emotion before we ever came up with a plan.
Were the runways blocked with helicopters in the end?
Nope.
And despite the
But I want to make something very clear. As a commander, I would never have ordered Mike Jackson to do something that he thought he couldn't do or shouldn't do without a full discussion of it and understanding what his objections were. Before we could ever get to that, we had this blow up over who was in charge.
And
so we never got to that point.
And despite this heated discussion and even the challenge to authority, even after this happened, you were still very comfortable with General Jackson's KFOR leadership, including over the American contingent, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, there's going to be multiple pages of waging modern war that we would admit in the course of the examination. We can admit them as we go. This first page we would ask to admit now. It's page DHT 11538.
Any objection to that page?
No.
DHT 11538 is admitted.
Will be assigned exhibit number P04514, currently classified as public.
Thank you. Now, General, we don't have much more time today. I'll finish my questions for you tomorrow. But just to turn briefly before we end to the period after the military technical agreement and the KLA demilitarization agreement were signed in June 1999. Just to start, and this is apparent from various comments you've made across your statement and also earlier today, is it fair to say that Slobodan Milosevic could not be trusted to keep his promises?
Yes and no.
Can you explain what you mean?
Milosevic would, if enforced, superficially keep promises. But I wasn't satisfied that there was not some intent to sabotage the NATO mission in some way and to possibly even regain control of all or parts of Kosovo.
Right, because the October 1998 ceasefire agreement you discussed in your statement, Slobodan Milosevic doesn't comply with it, does he?
He didn't sign it. See, this is the key. What he doesn't sign It's like he told me in the third meeting I had, he said, Mr. Shinovich, he says, I don't have to sign. I said, no, Mr. President, you do have to sign it.
And even after that interaction and he signs it, compliance was then even only temporary, correct?
Yes, I think what happened in that case is there was a Russian military delegation visiting Belgrade. It would have been in December. And I don't have any specific intelligence on this, but it was my assumption that the NATO potential campaign was discussed by the Russians. And the Russians basically said, don't sweat it. Air power won't do it. Go ahead and clean these people out the way you want to. Because after the first of the year, the same forces that had been withdrawn were brought back in.
And you were talking earlier today about the investigation into the Rechak massacre, and you thought he was going to rig that investigation, and it was insincere, his offer to do so.
Right.
So to turn now to Mitrovica in the summer of 1999, you were asked about Mitrovica, you were shown a media report. The KLA was threatening further military actions over what the Serbs were doing in Mitrovica in the summer of 1999, weren't they?
That I don't know. We didn't, that wasn't reported to me as a KLA threat.
Your Honor, we'd like to show a document at this point because of restrictions of the provider. It requires private session. It only takes a few minutes.
Into private session, please.
Your Honor, for in public session. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Noting the time, I believe that we're finished for today.
General Clark, we're finished for today. You've had a long day, and I hope you get some rest tonight. And we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for being
Your
with
Honor.
us.
Thank you.
Some guidance, Mr. Helling, your timetable.
We're still forecasting to finish in the second session tomorrow. So after the 11 o'clock break, but ending before 1 p.m.
All rise.